traveling for work. And if I had to go to work the next day, I dropped my kids off at my parents. They're going to stay with them for a couple of days. So pretty much the kids were with my parents and my wife was traveling. So I'm not doing anything. Yeah.
First person to show was American Ski Kennedy. And the only thing she said to me, did he pass out? Was he conscious? I said, well, when I got there, he was conscious.
Feel like a fire.
So we got the ski patrol. It was crazy. And then the ski.
That must be difficult when you're so involved in stuff that all of a sudden you
But we
find
have
To go on the last day.
There's got another one.
oh,
I don't know about him.
yeah.
Then I did.
Have some of the usual suspects like those.
She's out of town.
Right there at the base. You basically walked down the skis.
I guess we can.
She does. Oh, sorry.
You got a full house. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only thing is we don't have a vote. Yep.
Good, Georgiana?
We can get going. Yep.
Good morning. I'd like to call this Technical and Citizen Advisory Committee meeting for July to order. And I would like to say a special good morning to everybody. And looks like the meeting's well attended, although we're a little short on the CAC side. But we'll get started. And please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First is public comment. Do we have any public comment this morning? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the Executive Director's Report. Good morning, Georgiana.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone's faces. Hope you're having a wonderful summer. In your package, you'll find the TPO board actions and the meeting minutes from the May meeting, and that is for your information. Also, I wanted to update the members on a few projects. On June the 12th, the Melbourne Orlando International Airport hosted our Ellis Road stakeholder meeting. And the purpose of the meeting was to bring elected officials and the business community up to speed on all the progress that has been made on the Ellis Road widening project. The DOT provided the latest updates on the right-of-way acquisition and the parcels that are underway, and also gave an update on the pre-construction working group that has been developed, which is very, very helpful. And we also discussed current funding and our funding strategy to be able to get to that shortfall, to have a fully funded Ellis Road project. And so in your package, there are detailed meeting minutes. Also, another discussion that came out of a recent meeting with Secretary Tyler last week is the need for an advocacy group for the infrastructure grant. You know, as you know, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, I don't know if you have heard, but it has hit the streets. And Infra is a competitive grant under the Multimodal Highway and Freight projects. And the TPO's consultant, HDR, is developing that grant application and the benefit cost analysis on behalf of the county. And Brevard County will be the applicant. In other words, they will be submitting the grant in the USDOT or grants.gov website. But once that is submitted, and by the way, that is due August the 21st, so that is quickly approaching. Once that grant is submitted, the work really is not over because you really have to advocate for your project. You know, there are people in Washington that are reading these applications, and they need to understand the project, what the project is, and how this is going to benefit them for the investment. And so, having someone to advocate for you, being able to get in touch with your U.S. senators, your congressional delegation is extremely important. That was important for the NASA Causeway infrastructure grant that Space Florida received, and that is definitely an example of how to do it. And so it's extremely important. So Secretary Tyler has agreed to perhaps meet with the stakeholders at the airport. Cliff has arranged it to where they will host it again. And really, we're just going to talk about the advocacy plan because we need all of our municipalities to help us. We will be asking for letters of support, which is a very critical component of the application from our local governments. And so we're working on those letters this week, as a matter of fact. So stay tuned. There's a lot more to come and a lot of work that needs to be done over the next 2 months. Another project I wanted to mention, over the past week, there has been a lot of media coverage about the State Road 401 bridge replacement at the port. If you remember, the PD&E phase, DOT came and presented, I believe it was last year, on the PD&E phase. And what the PD&E study identified as far as the preferred alternative is a high-level fixed bridge. And as the PD&E phase is ending, we were all really looking forward to the design phase to begin. The design was funded in fiscal year 22, and it was getting ready to start any time now. Just recently, DOT was asked to re-engage with the commercial space companies before moving forward on the design for that typical section, because there was potentially a need to include basically a need in the future to transport rocket boosters that wouldn't fit under a fixed span bridge. So that was some of the conversation that the space industries were concerned about. So how does this fit in with the beach line widening? Well, depending on the preferred alternative of the 401 bridge, that directly ties in to the 528 widening. So, FDOT has made it clear that they are moving forward. There are things still being worked on behind the scenes as they, start having those conversations. But, everyone gets a little concerned when we have projects that slow down, I should say, because, we have to strategically set ourselves up for any sort of funding that may come our way and any sort of grant opportunities. If 528 and 401 is not in the DOT's work program for construction. We all know that. And funding is where I get really concerned because both of these, especially the 401 bridge replacement, needs to happen sooner rather than later. It is a single point of failure and it's a critical link. So we want the projects to continue to move forward. The conversations are underway, and we just want to kind of give you that information for situational awareness. All right. Moving on to the next slide, I do want to give some recent public engagement wins. We had our 2023 open house on June the 6th, and we had 53 attendees. So we were really excited about that. That is our largest attendees so far. A lot of great feedback, a lot of really good questions. And thank you to our TAC-CAC members that actually attended. We do appreciate that, the support for you to show up, and that's really important in what we do. And so my last thing I wanted to mention, I'm asked Shelby, our Education and Outreach Coordinator, to come up and talk about our Vision Zero workshop that we were so excited about.
Good morning, everyone. Shelby Villatoro, the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the TPO, and also the Vision Zero Project Manager. On June 14th, we hosted our Vision Zero Taking Action Together workshop here at the Center for Collab. I want to give a huge thanks to all of you who were able to attend. It was a half-day morning workshop. I know that's a lot of time out of your day, and you all are very busy, so I just want to give a shout out and thank you for those who were able to join us that morning. The goal of the workshop was really just to inspire innovation, share some best practices, and really foster a connection among everyone in the room, but also between some regional thought leaders and our Vision Zero champions here in Brevard. We distributed registration amongst the board, committees, law enforcement officials, and on social media, and so really just encouraged anyone who had a role to play, which I think is everybody here in the county, to join us. And so we got a lot of great attendance. We had about 40 people there, and it ranged from engineers and planners, who are the typical folks in the room, to also law enforcement. We had some advocates there, as well as some elected officials. So a really well-rounded group. We got people from the county, Brevard Public Schools, and 11 of our municipalities. So a really well-rounded group. During the workshop, I put up the speakers and what they were talking about there on the slide. But we heard about 5 different initiatives and projects. And so got a lot of great feedback from those in attendance. Everyone seemed to really enjoy the topics. And we did post those presentations on the website if any of you would like to visit and learn more. Thank you.
That concludes my reports.
A question?
Adam?
Adam Cole at District 1. Could you repeat the date that you mentioned, August?
August the 21st is.
Where is that?
That is when the infrastructure grant is due.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Georgiana, and I just want to echo what Georgiana said about the infra grant. It really is the best opportunity for us in this community to seek to get the funding that is needed to get Ellis Road built. So, you know, we really are looking for a strategic and a collective, you know, voice from the entire community to, like Georgiana said, advocate for the grant once it's been applied for. So. That meeting is at the airport. What is that date?
I do.
It's later this month, right?
It's later in the month.
Yeah, so 26th, thanks. That meeting, if anyone's interested in this room attending that meeting, to, like Georgiana stated before, write a letter, be an advocate for the project, that would be much appreciated.
Peter, you had something?
Yeah, one of the things I noted was that the cost of the widening went from 50 million to 80 million.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a tremendous increase. And what period of time was that? And do we know why, where, of that 30 million increase, what is it? Materials, labor,
Yes.
Yes.
cost of right-of-way? I don't know.
No, it basically, it was the materials. That is what the department is seeing, upwards of 30 to 50% cost increases. You know, the highest inflation since 1980. It is really a sign of the times. The fact that we're moving forward with the project at this point is not good timing, to say the least, but yet we don't have a choice. You know, we are finally to the point where the right-of-way will be completely certified and completed in 2024, fall of 2024, and we're ready to roll with construction. And so, yeah, the timing is not good.
Wow, that's really unbelievable.
Yes, yes.
On the other hand, if we wait any longer, years later, it's not going to get any cheaper. So the sooner we can get it built, the more cost-effective it'll be. Okay, next is the consent agenda. There's 3 items to today's consent agenda, and I'll read them aloud. The first item is the TAC-CAC meeting minutes from May 8th, 2023. Item 2 is work order 24-06 Kilo. That's the traffic data report and analysis scope of services. And item 3 is work order 24-07 Kilo, state of the system data dashboard scope of services. Can I get a motion to approve? Thank you, Devin. You know, we have a second.
Second.
Second by Jared. All those in favor,
Can I
please.
make-
Yes, go
Can I
ahead.
ask a question before we vote? 2 months ago, when we had our meeting, I asked a question in regards to item 6B.
6 TPO quiet zones.
No, the Transportation Improvement Program.
Oh, okay.
Did I get the letter? That's a 6B. Do you have an input you were going to get back with me on?
Well, I know that you sent quite a few comments, and I
Okay.
addressed those, and those have been sent to you.
Thank you,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, also, we're only on the consent agenda, which is item 4, so you're kind of just jumping the gun a little bit.
Thank you.
And from the TAC, did we have a second?
Yeah, second from James.
Oh, it's Jared, that's right. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Yeah, now the CAC, we do not have a quorum yet, so we cannot vote, although you can still ask questions, you can still participate in any discussions, although we just cannot take a vote.
Okay, moving on to the action items. We have 2 action items today. The first one is fiscal year 2024 list of project priorities. Morning, Sarah.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Sarah Crom, Senior Transportation Planner with the Space Coast TPO. If you recall, in May, I presented a very detailed presentation on our draft list of project priorities, and you've had since then to review, and so I'll just be providing a brief overview and be requesting recommendation for adoption. So as you recall, basically our list of project priorities serves to bridge our long-range transportation plan, which is our required planning document, to our transportation improvement plan. Essentially what it does is it prioritizes our multimodal list of projects, and it communicates to FDOT where we are wanting to pursue either federal or state funding. So once again, this is only for federal or state funded projects. If a project is being locally funded, it is not required to be on the LOP, or excuse me, list of project priorities. We then work with FDOT to program state and federal funding on our list of project priorities and implement our LRTP and master plan through this mechanism. So it takes those projects from the planning of the LRTP and puts them in the funded list of our TIP. When we're thinking about our list of project priorities, we always want to think interregional. So from MICO to MEMS, these projects should not only add value to your community, but to our transportation system and our region as a whole. As a quick reminder, the projects are ranked in 3 different ways. One, we have the quantitative score. This is based on very strict criteria, which is 0 to 100. Qualitative score, which is based upon consensus recommendation by our transportation subcommittee, 0 to 15 points. And then of course there's discretionary ranking where any of our committees or board can make a motion with our governing board having the final say on where that project ends up. For the criteria that's 0 to 100, we base it on 5 emphasis areas. Safety, so thinking about where our Vision Zero and our high crash corridor. Transportation and land use, how can we improve the access to our education, our community resources, our activity centers, our economic drivers, ports, et cetera. Sustainability and resiliency, so improving drainage, wastewater, planning for flooding, as well as sea level rise and other aspects. Innovation, project improves travel time reliability, or it implements an innovative solution such as ITS. And finally, multimodal, and that's bicycle, pedestrian, transit needs. So a quick reminder of what's new. We had 5 projects added. We had a planning study for Norfolk Parkway Extension, On the regionally significant list, 2, number 15, Wickham Road at Post Road, and then the Minton Road intersection improvements, which came out of the Minton Road feasibility study, and then 2 discretionary grants, Micco Road Complete Street and St. John's Heritage Parkway widening. We did have a discretionary ranking request come out of our governing board when I presented the list in May. And so the governing board has requested that State Road 524 move from number 8 to number 4 to align with project number 5, which is Clear Lake or State Road 501 widening, to address the congestion and development issues that are occurring in that corridor. And then finally, just to give you guys a process overview, essentially, as you're aware, we start with a call for projects. That usually happens in January. We give 2 or 3 months for the municipalities to submit their applications. Internally, we evaluate and rank, and then we take it through our governing board, TAC, CAC, and BPAC, for adoption of the list of project priorities. Following adoption, I'll then submit it to FDOT, as well as we'll also form our funding recommendations based on the priority ranking. FDOT will review applications. I know several of you have already received emails from FDOT reviewing the applications that were submitted, those 5 new applications. And then they'll begin meeting with locals and vetting those projects for feasibility and also risk management. Projects are then programmed and the work program is developed, and then the projects are ultimately implemented either through a LAP or local agency program project, or FDOT will actually sometimes implement when it's on a state road. So with that, I would like to request motion to adopt fiscal year 24 list of project priorities, as well as I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Any discussion from the TAC? I'd look for a motion to adopt item A. Motion from Frank, second from Steve. We'll take it over to the CAC.
Okay, and from the CAC, before I call for a motion, there's one thing I want to mention. If you look on page 4 of the project priority list, under state safety improvements, not ranked, there are 9 items on there. The first one is item A, is I-95 Malabar Road interchange. I know FDOT is probably tired of hearing it. I'm sure a lot of other people are tired of hearing about it, but at our last meeting, our city engineer, Frank Watanabe, spoke about it. I spoke about it. At the executive board meeting, our mayor, Rob Medina, spoke about it, and that interchange is deadly, okay? The exit lane isn't wide enough, causing cars to back up onto the right lane of I-95, causing numerous accidents. If you look at this project priority list, this is not ranked. Its planning is estimated to take place in 2024, which means any construction probably wouldn't take place until 2025 at the earliest. That's a major problem for that. So I just want to talk about it. I'm going to continue to talk about it, and so will everybody else involved, particularly with the city, until maybe people get so tired of hearing it about, they'll do something about it. But it's something that really needs to be addressed. Having said that, Adam.
Well, yeah, can I follow up with a question? Is there anything that we as a body can do?
As a body, the only thing that we can do is to keep talking about it. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the...
Okay, do we have a second? Motion from Adam, second from Martin. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And from the TAC, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We're going to back up now just to get, we have a quorum for the CAC. We're going to back up to that first, well, it's not the first item, the consent agenda.
Okay, on the consent agenda, now that we have a quorum, we can vote on it. If there are no questions, can I get a motion, please? Motion from Peter Fuskis, second from Arlen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Cliff.
Sure. Okay, we're going to go back to the action items. Our second item today is Resolution 24-03, fiscal year 2024 through fiscal year 2028, Transportation Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be a very short presentation, but this is a very important document. This is our fiscal year 24 through 28 Transportation Improvement Program, and this is one of our major work products. We did present the draft in May, and the TIP has been out for a 30-day public comment period, and we have received some really good feedback on projects that either are or are not in the TIP, and those do go on the record and incorporated into the TIP document. And just as a reminder, you know, the TIP was developed from our list of project priorities, last work program cycle, and the DOT incorporates any new funding into the Transportation Improvement Program, as well as, you know, new resurfacing projects, safety projects, or what have you, get incorporated into the TIP, and the governor adopts it the first part of the year, and then it becomes part of the adopted work program. So $1.3 billion, 120 projects in the TIP. We can't get what we want without the money, and that's really what it's about. It's bringing in that state and federal funding into Brevard County for our economic development, safety, quality of life projects, and this is extremely important to what we do. It's, as my predecessor said one time, and I love this quote, it's where the planning meets the money, and that really is a fact. Just a few really quick highlights. Our highway capacity state road projects, we have 3 major ones. County road projects, we have 2 projects in that, which is Ellis and of course Malabar Road. And we have bridge replacements, 1 bridge replacement, which is the FDOT District 4, that's the Sebastian River Bridge replacement. It's not in our district, but we were asked to incorporate it into our TIP for planning consistency. 19 resurfacing projects and 4 bridge rehabilitation projects. And then we have our modal partners, space, transit, aviation, and seaport. You typically will not see these projects on our list of project priorities, as our modal agencies work directly with FDOT District 5 and central office on the programming. But I think we can all say that our economy is largely driven by the activities at these ports, and is extremely important to who we are here in Brevard. We also have trails, sidewalks, complete streets. That one project is our A1A Complete Street project. And we also have safety and technology, intelligent transportation projects as well. And so, you know, this is a lot of money. $1.3 billion is a lot of money coming into Brevard County. And so, you know, your representation on this committee really is what helps us, you know, your directives is what funds these projects as we develop our project priorities and you approve these plans. So I want to say thank you very much. And we are asking for approval of our 24 through 28 Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you, Georgiana. Resolution 24-03, any discussion from the TAC? Any questions for Georgiana? If not, could I get a motion to adopt? Okay, Frank made a motion and Devin seconded. I will send it over to the CAC.
Okay, from the CAC, can I get a motion, please? Motion from Peter. We have a second from CAC. And second from Josiah. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
And from the TAC, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. That concludes our action items for today. Next is the presentations. We actually have 2 presentations today, and 2 very interesting presentations. The first one is the Federal Railroad Administration update.
Yep. As Rory comes up, I just want to introduce him, Rory Newton from the Federal Railroad Administration, and he has come and sat down with Laura and I to talk about the FRA process, and he's a very good partner. So welcome, Rory. We're looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you. Again, I'm Rory Newton. I'm a railroad safety inspector with the Federal Railroad Administration. I'm with the Grade Crossing and Trespasser Outreach Division, and some of my duties include coming to public events like this to speak and give information about the Federal Railroad Administration, but I'm also an inspector, so I actually go out and literally inspect railroad crossings for compliance with the federal rules. Just real briefly about the agency, what is the Federal Railroad Administration? It's part of the Department of Transportation. It was established in 1966 along with the creation of the DOT that was signed into law by President Johnson. The photo there's, oops, I'm using the wrong thing here. There it is. The President Johnson signed it on October 15th, 1966. The creation of the DOT put all modes of transportation under one department. Before it was kind of everywhere. The Maritime Administration existed, FAA existed prior to 66, but they were almost independent agencies. Some additional administrations in the DOT, the Pipeline Hazardous Material Administration, they kind of set the rules for all hazmat in the country. Federal Highway Administration, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, lots of highway stuff, obviously. Federal Transit Administration, and of course the FAA, and formerly the Coast Guard, which is now part of Homeland Security. And the FRA, we have a mission of enabling the safe, reliable, and efficient movement of people and goods. It's kind of a broad thing, but as the FRA, it's a safety agency. We write regulatory rules. The railroads have to comply with these rules or they can be subject to fines. It's administrative rule enforcement. We're not law enforcement, though. Some of the things we do is obviously the safety inspections, regulatory enforcement, accident investigations. The photo on the left there is kind of an example of I don't know if you can see if the angle, but the crossing flashers actually flopped open. And so if a driver drove up there, they wouldn't even see it flashing. So that's something we would go out and, if we find that, that's a violation of the rules, gets written up, roads have to fix it, or subject to fines. The vehicle on the right there, that's the automatic track inspection program car of one of several. These are machines that are operated by FRA personnel to inspect railroad tracks. These are high-tech pieces of equipment. They are measuring the tracks for defects and quality control, make sure the railroad's complying to the rules, and they have to let us on their railroad to do these inspections. Another part of the FRA is research and development. Half the FRA is inspectors. There's almost 1,000 people in the FRA. It's a small agency, but half of us is people like me. We actually go out in the field and inspect railroads. The other portion of it is research and development. On the left there is a photo from our social media. The FRA sponsored a study by the University of Illinois and a company called RailMetrics, and they're using 3D laser scanning and deep convolutional neural networks. Yeah, science. They're looking for how tracks change, the wear patterns, and looking for defects in the rails before they become problems and we can avoid accidents. The FRA also operates a kind of a proving grounds in Pueblo, Colorado. It's the Transportation Technology Center. There are multiple permanent loops of track out there. They run trains at high speed, low speed. They actually have tracks that are purposely have defects in them to test the range of ability of rail cars, so they're not just going on the track with no safety tests. We actually do crash testing on rail car, and you can see there's a picture of a tank car being slammed by a battering ram there. So tank cars obviously been in the news recently with the hazardous materials. So the cars aren't just willy-nilly. There are standards, and they have to meet certain minimums, and that the TTC helps rail builders meet those standards. The other part is our grants and public outreach. The FRA actually administers several $100 million in grants, actually over $1 billion with the recent bipartisan infrastructure law. This year we've been doing, there was the Great Cross Elimination Grants was $570 million where we funded 63 projects in 32 states. Florida got $16 million, and specifically in Broward County for their troubles with their crossings down there. And it kind of goes to the trends nationally. We have Florida is number 3 national. This, if you notice the states, California, Texas, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, New York, kind of trade places. They're top 5 population states, so it doesn't really surprise anybody. But the problem is that the trend is going up. It's not going down. And this may speak to our constant population increase, more cars on the road, more trains, longer trains, and just people are not getting out of the way of trains on railroad crossings. District 3s, which I'm part of, that's the Southeast United States. Florida is number 1 in grade crossing collisions and trespassing incidents. You can see there's quite a significant jump from Florida, and Georgia is probably the only state close enough in population to compare. A lot of trespassing fatalities in Florida. A lot of people were wandering on railroad tracks that shouldn't be there. It's kind of it's a national problem. It's not just Florida, but it is a U.S. problem. We don't see these kinds of issues on a global scale. I don't know, we can't keep our feet off railroad tracks. Local trends for crossing incidents. Brevard County is very good. It's there in the middle one there, the yellow, this is a 5-year spread, 2018, 2022. Only 10 incidents, 2 fatalities and 2 injuries. That means there were 6 non-injury incidents, which probably speaks to cars that were abandoned on grade crossings and the driver's occupants were able to bail out before a collision. You see, compare the Broward County, 112 with 32 fatalities, and a majority of those were within the last year, actually. Actually, I think it's probably higher. Trespassing incidents, here's the other half. Same thing, Brevard County again, 10 fatalities, 8 injuries over a 5-year spread. Compared to down south, they have 110 between Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. It's just, the differences there, it's heavily urbanized railroad. It's the Florida East Coast Railway. It's the same piece of track right outside the building here. The difference is there, they have been super encroached upon, and this speaks to urban planning, or the lack thereof, in South Florida, where they've basically put everything on top of these railroad tracks, and they're wondering, what are all these problems here? It's like, well, you build a condo across the street from a train track and it'll give a place people to walk, they're gonna walk on the train tracks. Or they'll just ignore the grade crossings because there's so many trains, they just become part of the background. And it's an unfortunate mentality that's hard to break sometimes. So FRA efforts in Florida, specifically 2022 in October, another grant program was called the RAISE grant. $25 million was awarded to Brightline, FEC, and some of the communities down south for adding 4-quadrant gates at grade crossings, including installing public safety fencing. Then April of this year, we did, I say we, I mean the FRA and Brightline, we did inspections of their new construction. This was an engineering inspection where they have their drawings of what they say for each grade crossing, what signs are going to be there, where the flashers and the extra gates, and we're making sure their engineering drawings match what they physically installed and getting them corrected to match. So if they moved a sign around, it's got to be on the plans. So the plans had to match what was physically present. And it's just an accountability, trust but verify kind of thing. And then we also had a lot of improvements and changes that they had to do. The FRA hired an additional inspector for grade crossings in Florida. This individual started in May, and we're on track for possibly a third. And I believe FDOT also intends to hire another one. So grade crossings, there's a recognized issue of safety, and trying to identify these problems, you need people to do it. And so we're working on that too. Broward County, it's been in the news a little bit, for getting the grant, but also their quiet zone is under federal review for termination. This is for numerous issues with fatal crossing accidents, numerous trespassing fatal incidents, and what they have installed when they built the quiet zone, or they established it, I should say, is not sufficient, or it's not looking like it's sufficient. And once this review is completed, there might be some changes for that county. All quiet zones are audited regularly, but the review is a separate special process within the quiet zone rules. March 23, we did a grade crossing focus inspection. We dragged down as many railroad inspectors as we can get our hands on for crossings, and we hit dozens of crossings in a few days, and then give those reports to railroads for their correction, the defects and whatnot. We did Palm Beach, Broward, Miami County. I think we had 20 inspectors over a 3-day period, and over 50 crossings were inspected. So, and in May 23, the $16 million grant was awarded for crossing improvements in Broward County. This next part, this is a video clip from our YouTube channel of the FRA Administrator Amit Bose. And this is just talk about the grant programs that were authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we're just gonna get this going. There it is.
Hi, I'm Amit Bose, Deputy Administrator at the Federal Railroad Administration. On November 15th, 2021, President Biden signed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, a generational investment in America's transportation network. It will allow the nation to modernize its infrastructure, making it safer and more resilient. It will make our transportation systems more equitable and help fight climate change. It will create good-paying jobs and lay the foundation for America to compete and win in the 21st century. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law provides never-before-seen funding amounts for rail in America. Over the coming 5 years, it provides FRA with $102 billion in total rail funding. That includes $66 billion from advanced appropriations and $36 billion in authorized funding. As part of this funding, FRA will greatly expand existing competitive discretionary grant programs, substantially increase the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Grant Program, also known as CRISI, by $2 billion a year. Provide $43.5 billion over 5 years for an expanded Fed-State partnership grant program that will include at least $24 billion for the Northeast Corridor and $12 billion for the rest of the country. It will provide $500 million over 5 years for restoration and enhancement grants. There are also several new programs introduced under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. These include the Corridor Identification and Development Program. This program will identify new intercity passenger rail corridors, develop the necessary service planning elements, and create a non-Northeast Corridor project pipeline for associated capital projects. The Railroad Grade Crossing Elimination Program, which is funded at $5.5 billion over 5 years, will focus on increasing grade crossing safety across the country and eliminate known high-risk crossings. The Interstate Rail Compacts Grant Program is funded at $15 million over 5 years. It will provide funding for systems planning, including studying the impacts on freight rail operations and ridership. This is such an exciting time for me to be back at FRA and Department of Transportation. I am honored that President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg have entrusted me to serve in this position at the Federal Railroad Administration at such a pivotal time in our agency and industry's history, and that they are entrusting FRA with these taxpayer dollars to advance railroad safety, state of good repair, restoration, and expansion. Over the coming weeks and months, FRA will hold initial listening sessions about broad industry needs. In the future, we plan to conduct additional sessions on specific grant programs. The goal of these sessions is to hear about the challenges faced with prior FRA grant programs and best practices to model for success. We want to ensure that we are administering the funds in the most equitable way possible. Although we can't change the eligibility requirements, we want to provide the necessary support to our stakeholders. The initial listening sessions will start in the next few weeks, with the focused listening sessions starting the first quarter of 2022. FRA also plans to hold educational sessions to provide information on the grant application process. We especially want to reach those who have never participated in FRA's prior grant opportunities. Anyone can join and ask questions at these educational sessions. They will be recorded and published on FRA's website to use as a resource throughout the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law implementation. These grant application process educational sessions will begin in the first quarter of 2022. After we've collected comments and input, FRA will re-engage in a second round of outreach. This step will happen in the second quarter of 2022, once we have incorporated feedback and insights from our earlier sessions. Be on the lookout for announcements about engagement opportunities. All of this work is so important to the success of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I look forward to working alongside all of you as we implement and oversee these programs and this historic moment. Thank you.
Okay, so that video is from a little bit last year, early last year, and so that's why he's referring to when he was appointed as the administrator. But the grants he was talking about are from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The FRA's never had this kind of funding. Biden, they used to call him Amtrak Joe because he rode Amtrak basically every day when his work was in the Senate. So he's very pro-rail. And I remember, sir, you were talking about the exploding costs. Well, I'll give you 80% with our grants, but you got to apply for them. And these don't have to be shovel-ready projects. And the FRA will also give grants for studies to figure out exactly what you need. And I was kind of disappointed to see there was no real rail projects on your list of future projects. And, you know, the opportunity to eliminate a major grade crossing that causes a lot of congestion and drives you crazy. You're sitting there watching that 10,000-foot freight train roll by. You go, I wish there was a bridge here. Well, this is the opportunity to make that happen. And if you don't get it, guess what? The money's going to go to California. It'll go to Texas. They'll give it away to everybody else that applies for it. And it's there for whoever comes with it. And if you come with a program to eliminate grade crossings, that project's going to get serious consideration. They will take grant applications for improving safety, but you know the goal is to get rid of the grade crossings. They are the problem. And that's where all the collisions, a lot of the accidents are happening, and a lot of the congestion. And you know, a collision at a grade crossing is, you know, it causes a major impact. Well, the death of the person is a tragedy for that family and the people who surround that person. But when you shut down an entire town for 2 to 4 hours to investigate a death, you're strangling entire cities. You know, we have these problems in Chicago where they have a grade crossing collision to fatality and they shut down the railroad. I don't want to use the wrong term. 600,000 commuters get stranded because they have to shut down the railroads for a fatal crossing accident in Chicago. And that's a major impact on community. You're talking millions of dollars in commerce grinding to a stop because nothing can move. You gridlock everything. And it happens up here, not as common in Brevard County, fortunately, but you know, if you hit a freight train, hit somebody, they got to stop and investigate. They usually got to change the crews out. That takes hours to resolve, especially if it's a fatal accident. So the impact of community is just more just the cost of the infrastructure problem. You want to get away from all the tragedy that follows along with the accidents. So this is a little more detailed spread of what the law, the bipartisan infrastructure law is funding. And it's been authorized through 2028. It's a 5-year law, which is a pretty expansive way of doing grant money. And these are 2026, excuse me, that's right. It's right there in front of me. The Christie grant being $1 billion per year, that's a lot of money. That's never had that amount of funding. And then they added this railroad grade crossing elimination grant at $600 million per year. And we just awarded the $600 million, was end up being $570 for 2022's amounts. And we're expecting the applications to come in for next year's funding to be the next couple of months. So you still have a chance to get some money, free money, sort of. And then, yeah, it's more of the same. It's just, you just say the money's just money everywhere. And if you're not going to come get it, there's not much I can do to help you. So here's our timelines. You can see 2022, May, June, we just announced that grant. And then we're looking at the 2023 grant applications are September, October. So for funding for this year's cycle, it will be announced next year. You got to apply with about 8 months in advance. And like I said, they don't have to be shovel-ready projects. If you know what you want and know what it costs, and you can give a whole explanation, there's an application process. It's all electronic. It's all done online, actually. Anybody can apply, especially a TPO, local cities. These are the applicants. The railroads don't apply for this. They're actually not allowed to. It's up to the actual local municipalities in the states to come after this funding. I know the railroads will be partners. Brightline is going to have a presentation. They're going to talk about how much work they do to get grants secured for their communities they serve. And it's a lot of process, but they're a good partner, and they're coming through your community. And you should not ignore that opportunity. Most railroads aren't very talkable to the neighborhoods they run through. But Brightland's a little different, which is a nice change. Looking at 2024, pushing out, it's same thing. You know, your grant application is about anywhere from 8 months to a year prior to the actual distribution of the funds. So you got a little time to make things work. And also, like I said, you can get funding for studies. If you don't know what you need, which is usually a big question, it's like, oh, we want to get rid of this grade crossing. What do we need? I don't know. How much does it cost? I don't know. How much does a bridge cost over a railroad crossing? 20, 50, 100 million bucks? You know, a grant for $250,000 is a lot easier to give out than 30 million if you don't know what you're doing. So, and they do, those are a lot of the grants. And for this grade crossing elimination grant this year, they had I think it was like 8-to-1 funding ratio. So we had 500 million, we had 2 billion or 4-to-1, 2 billion in applications or 4 billion applications, something crazy like that. So they're attacking these. I'm going to segue into quiet zones. That's a big topic. This is a photo I took. This is down in Jensen Beach. This is at a very unusual railroad crossing. It goes right through the middle of a roundabout. And they have intention of doing a quiet zone through all these areas. And I don't think anybody up here has applied for anything. Not yet, Georgiana. Okay, so, but that's something that also I have a lot of responsibility with my position, is helping municipalities establish quiet zones. A quiet zone are federally regulated. So when you establish a quiet zone, you're not just inviting the federal government into your front yard or your backyard. We're coming into your house, we're putting your feet on the coffee table. So there are specific guidelines on how they operate. The railroads have to comply with them. If a community decides to establish one, we call them a public authority, you know, they're in charge of that quiet zone. They're responsible for maintaining the standards. In some cases, they have to make agreements with the railroad to install additional warning devices that the communities have to pay for, and then pay for the maintenance in perpetuity. So they can be expensive, and every quiet zone is different. There's no one size fits all. It's how it's designed, how big they are, and what you need. And these are some of the community partners we have, the public authorities here in Florida. Broward County has probably one of the largest quiet zones in the country. It's 68 crossings, which is, it's almost too big. Orlando has multiple quiet zones. They have a single crossing quiet zone in the mix of all their other ones. Dade County, Seminole, Jacksonville's got them, a Baldwin, Clearwater. Tampa's looking to establish one. We actually have inspections this week with Tampa to call a diagnostic review, where we go out with the community or city leaders. They have a contractor, the railroads participate, and we actually physically walk the quiet zone and look at each crossing and say what's needed, what's not needed. And so we give a lot of technical advice. You're not just thrown in the deep end and here's the rule book that's only 80 pages for this one rule. Hope you can read through all that and figure it out. No, we're there to help. We're here to help. So yeah, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Yeah. Quiet zones must meet a regulatory rule safety calculations. Yes, we have a website for this. It's a free calculator. So if you feel like playing with this, you can. It's totally free. You can make as many quiet zones as you want. You're not actually going to establish anything by accident. And it is a little funky, and you kind of need some guidance. I know I was talking to Georgiana, there's be some technical work with quiet zones in the future here in the Space Coast. So I'll be here to give how to use this calculator. We'll give a whole class just on this calculator, because it's a little complicated, but it's not. If you don't know what you're looking at, it can be confusing, but we can definitely teach you how to plug the data in and come up with an actual very reasonable risk index this calculator spits out. So, and I have all these websites on the at the end of the slides too. Let's see here. The public authorities must submit an affirmation every 2.5 to 3 years in most cases. Sometimes if they do a little more extra work on the safety, they can get a 5-year affirmation process. This affirmation is basically a validation process. And this is part of where we come into your house and tell you how to do things, or else. The public authority has to maintain these quiet zones. It's not the railroad, it's not the FRAs, it's the city of X, or the county of this. This is a quiet zone. It is your quiet zone. And the rules is written that the railroads cannot prohibit these. You know, they have to meet the safety standards. They don't got to pay for anything, but it's up to the public authority to do all the legwork. And we'll help. I mean, we'll give you the guidance. We can't negotiate on your behalf, but we can tell you what's true and what's not. So We do audits regularly of these quiet zones where we just go out there and make sure all the SSMs, the supplemental safety measures, are in place. If you put a median in and it has the delineators down it, and those are one of the required ones for some of them, if they're all broken off, we're going to let you know. And if you don't fix them with a certain amount of time, we'll suspend your quiet zone. So we'll hold you accountable. Grant funding cannot be used to establish quiet zones. It's not looking like it's going to be much an issue up here with the number of grade crossing upgrade for the high speed rail, that they may qualify without anything, but you can't go get a grant to put a 4-quadrant gates on a crossing and then for the specific reason of getting a quiet zone. So you got to kind of word your grants specifically for safety, not quiet zones. There are over 45 quiet zones in Florida right now. We're not the #1 quiet zones in the country, but we're definitely on an upward trend. I'm sure we're going to have over 60 by end of 2025 is my projection. I'm just totally guessing. But that's kind of it for my brief run, but I'm happy to take as many questions as you got. Sir.
Let me start. Adam Kohler, District 1. Can you tell me, without spending a half an hour, what's the benefit of the quiet zone? Does that mean the train has to slow down? I mean, what are we talking about here?
A quiet zone is strictly the silencing of the routine sounding of the train horns. It has nothing to do with train speed. And I say routine is a very specific word. It's in the rule. The grade crossings, they're required to whistle for, they being the railroads. There's a whistle cadence, a pattern. There's a decibel level and how long they blow the horn for. This rule allows that to be stopped. So you don't listen to train horns at a grade crossing. They still can use the horns, and a lot of times they're required to use for other safety reasons, like whistling for workers working along the railroad tracks or leaving a station. They do whistle for that kind of stuff. But your general grade crossing, they're blowing before they get there all the way through town, that stops.
Okay, so let me do a follow-up and then I'll keep quiet. My thought is, does that mean that you're less likely to know there's a train coming if we have established a quiet zone because the sound level has been reduced?
Yes, that is a direct consequence of it, and it is a challenge. And to compensate for the train horn has a value in that calculator. I wish I had a page pulled up what the calculator looked like. The train horn has a value of safety, and this is all done with there's like a point system for this calculator, and you have to replace that train horn with other safety measures. We call them supplemental safety measures, or SSMs, and that's like one of them is like the 4-quadrant gate system where you have a gate arm blocking every approach to the crossing, even the opposing side of the roads. So that's one way to make it safer. The railroads would tell you these things are not safe. Some people in the FRA would tell you they're not safe. They are not a safety thing. They are a quality of life improvement. And so you do trade off some awareness, and that's an argument that's made for Broward County of the amount of incidents they've had is the awareness is too low. They have 100 some crossings in Broward County, or 70 crossings in Broward County. People don't seem to be aware there's trains running through there at 80 miles an hour, or they don't care. And that's the other issue. People have been complacent with freight trains going a certain speed. They see the gates down. Oh, I can beat that. I don't even see the train, but by the time they make that judgment to go around the safety devices, that other train is probably going faster has now closed that distance, and they get into a collision.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at. Appreciate your help.
And Martin?
Yeah, I had 2 questions. One, on eliminating the crossings by a flyover, is there a criteria like cars per day and things of that sort in order to meet that? So to see how many would qualify in Brevard County. And then also on I-95, you see they build the walls, for sound, I think mostly. Is there something like that where you have a concentration of neighborhoods where you mentioned, people cross because there's a store right across rather than going to the road? And would those things be considered for application for the funding to build those types of walls?
So with the criteria for the grants is not up to me or my division with the FRA. There is a whole grants department. It's purposely separated so we don't have any kind of favoritism. They don't tell us on purpose, so we don't give people bad information. But you want to take your your worst cross, as the administrator said, you want to take the highest risk crossing out of the equation. You don't want to put a bridge over a country road with 1,000 cars a day on it. You want to take that 40,000 car a day crossing out. That's where you're going to have all your risk. The grant funding can be used for what we call channelization devices, which fencing, walls, to get people to direct them to the crossings as opposed to taking the shortcut. So yeah, there are other improvements that can be done, and that's you're going to see fencing is going to put in from that RAISE grant. They got 21 miles of fencing out of that. That was from the 2022 grant. I think Brightline has a little piece on that as well, but there are options. Sometimes you just can't put an overpass. There's just no choice. You got to have the crossing. You need it's an arterial road. You can't take it out, and there's no room for an overpass, or it's so cost prohibitive you can't do it. So you got to come up with Plan B or C or D in some cases. Somebody else had a hand up, sir.
Yeah, I used to live in Martin County, and this is not Brevard, but there is a drawbridge in Martin County that goes over a canal, which has a lot of controversy, I understand, from my relatives down there. And I was wondering, has that been resolved?
Well, the Coast Guard made a rule change, I can tell you that much, and the controversy seems to be carrying on. It's not, the FRA is not involved with the bridge or the operation of it. That's a Coast Guard, that's their prerogative. And between the bridge operator, which is the Florida East Coast Railway. So if there's any battling, it's between those two groups. We don't have a stake in it. As the FRA anyway.
So,
but I agree, it does appear to be controversial. So
does the municipality then have to pay for, if you're going to do a bridge over and eliminate the drawbridge?
I wouldn't know. That's, the railroad owns the track, they own the bridge. Most railroad track in the United States is privately owned. FEC is a privately held company. It's not a government-run operation. It's government regulated. So if they want to change their bridge, they can certainly pay for their own bridge if they want. But I don't think there's anything stopping them from, if there's any grants out there to seek, they can certainly apply for them. But I don't know which grants would be available for some kind of project like that. I mean, it's not entirely impossible, but the funding that's here, this is for highway grade crossing grants that we saw today. They're not for making it convenient for boaters or anything like that, as far as I'm aware.
Any other questions for Roy?
Yeah, Arlen.
Yeah, early on you talked about measuring the tracks for wear and tear. How frequently is that done? Yearly or what?
Track inspections, but the railroad does a lot of the inspections themselves. They have their own rules that they establish themselves. There's a federal minimum, and we hold them to the federal standards. So the railroads either try to keep to the minimum or slightly above, so that we don't come by in our inspections and catch them non-compliant. The inspections that we do, they're unannounced. They're anytime we think they're needed. They're continuous. The railroads generally, the main lines, the higher classification of the track, the more inspections they're required to do. Some tracks are several times a week, especially with passenger routes. They're very carefully scrutinized.
Okay,
so we only have a handful of those track inspections. The railroads have these too. They run their own track inspection machines. They actually, I don't have a photo of one, but they even have these totally autonomous ones now. They look like a box car, and it does almost the same thing. They just run them around on trains, and they detect a problem. They phone home, their ET, they phone home for help when they find a problem, and they can go out and fix it. So the technology is being leveraged more than just the old-fashioned track inspector driving his pickup truck down the track and looking for physical defects that he can see. We take advantage of, sonar, lasers, infrared, everything they can think of. Lasers, it's Star Trek, man.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Roy?
What's been the outcome from those accidents that we've had, this past year?
Which accidents?
Like the one that was in Ohio?
Oh, the East Palestine. That's still under investigation, and the root causes for it, and then the changes that are coming down. I think the FRA is looking at creating a rule. There wasn't before for the trackside detectors that monitor wheel temperature and bearing temperatures. Those were not regulated. They were industry standards by the railroads themselves, and how many they placed per how many miles and how they monitored them or operated them was up to them. Now there's going to be it's looking like there's going to be some kind of now baseline standards for how many they need to have, and how they operate them. So to raise a bar there.
I was thinking it's kind of when we have the accident, we kind of look into things and make improvements.
Yes, and it did show. You can't argue there's not a hole there. That how could a train go down the track with its bearings on fire and no one stopped the train, and it went past multiple hot pot detectors? Well, how the railroad operated the detectors was maybe the issue. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not investigating it, but there's clearly something that could be changed that could improve safety, and may not be convenient for the railroad or cost effective, but it's like positive train control. It was pushed upon the railroads by the government. So sometimes it takes government action to make it the standard better.
Okay, thank you very much, Roy.
Welcome. Thank you for your time. Oh, and there is, nope, come on. Wanted to see that's my sources, so.
Mr. Chair, I will say, when we sent the agenda out, the presentation did not make it. We have it loaded up on our website if you want to see Rory's full presentation, and we will also have Brightline's presentation up on the website as well.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana. Yep. And Brightline is next, going to talk about quiet zones as well, I believe.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Mitzner. I'm Director of Public Affairs for Brightline, based here in Central Florida at our Central Florida offices. I've been here, I've had the pleasure of presenting to you in the past, and so excited to be here again and give you an update on where we are. I first want to thank Rory and the FRA. They are tremendous partners of ours as we operate in South Florida and are continuing our expansion to Orlando. I want to, on the message of safety, if you have your cell phone on you and you can snap this QR code, this will take you to our Rail Safety Pledge. So this is on our website. This pledge is pledging many basic things that all of us adhere to, hopefully, and that is staying off of the tracks, only crossing at a designated crossing, never going around those gates, as Rory mentioned, and only crossing at a designated crossing and following the law at all times. And so we have, I believe, hit over 9,000 online rail safety pledges since we began our latest safety campaign earlier this year. Our goal is to have 50,000 pledges by the end of the year. So I encourage you to snap that QR code and go ahead and take that online pledge. So I want to, two things today. One, I want to update you on where we are with construction. I have a video that's going to show you some of the progress and the improvements that have been made at the railroad crossings. And then I also want to highlight some of the outreach work that we have been doing here in the last couple of months, especially as we gear up to Orlando. And so let's go ahead and start off with our Space Coast update. Our testing is ongoing. Our 110-mile-an-hour testing has been done south of Brevard County to this point. Our Brevard County 110 testing right now is scheduled to take place the week of July 24th. That is subject to change. We have many different things, as Rory knows, that go into when that testing takes place. Right now, that's the schedule, but we will be pushing out communications. We will be doing media outreach as we get closer to that. So that is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. We have opened Melbourne Avenue, which goes under the Crane Creek Bridge just south of the city of Melbourne, and we've also opened Prospect Avenue, which is just south of the Crane Creek Bridge, and that is a railroad crossing. So we did open both of those. The crossing and the bridge work, it really, that construction work now is complete. We are doing additional punch list items and some additional work on those, as well as track work on both of the new line that Brightline built and the existing main line for the Florida East Coast Rail. Once we are operational to Orlando, those two tracks will be interoperable. So we will be able to travel on both and freight will be able to travel on both. So we have rebuilt all of the railroad crossings or rehabilitated the railroad crossings between Cocoa and West Palm Beach. There are 155, actually 156 of those railroad crossings in that 129-mile corridor. 50 of those are in Brevard County. So many of you know where they are. They're near your homes, they're near your businesses, and we know that when we shut down those crossings to do these safety improvements, there was a detour involved, and I worked with many of your staff within the communities to get that information out there. So we thank everyone for their patience with that as we did those improvements. So what were those improvements? Well, all of the crossings were upgraded to meet the standards that are set by the FRA and FDOT. That included new roadway profiles, adding double track. You can see there at 520, which is right near where we are here in Cocoa, actually adding, there are 3 tracks there now. We've added new gate mechanisms, new auxiliary flasher lights, enhanced signage, signals, and pavement markings. And then, as Rory mentioned, in terms of those quad gates, those sealed corridors, we have installed either quad gates or medians at all of the railroad crossings where our speeds will exceed 79 miles an hour. So those quad gates is when the 2 gates come down together, or when they come together, it's almost impossible for a vehicle to get around those gates. And then in areas where we don't have the quad gates and we're going more than 79, we'll have a median installed. A good example of that is at Strawbridge in Melbourne, where we have a median installed. And actually, there's a median that has been installed now also at 520. We've also installed new sidewalks and curbs and pedestrian gates. We've made them quiet zone compatible, and then working on advanced technology with positive train control throughout those crossings. So the next is a video that's showing our progress to Orlando. So before I show that though, let me just back up. I don't want to assume that everyone knows what Brightline is. We are the only modern, eco-friendly, privately funded intercity rail project in the country. We currently operate service in South Florida between Miami and West Palm Beach. We also have stations in Aventura, Fort Lauderdale, and Boca Raton. Orlando is slated to open in a matter of weeks. We've started selling tickets for travel starting September 1st that goes into January of 2024. And so as we get closer, we're going through our testing, our certification with the Federal Railroad Administration, and as we get closer to an actual opening date, we will be announcing that. So this is the progress to Orlando, and specifically take a look at the work that we have done at the crossings. A lot of this is drone footage, so you can actually see those improvements that we've made and the improvements of the bridges throughout your community. Traveling between West Palm and Cocoa, that top speed will be 110 miles an hour. Our top speed, once we go west from Cocoa to Orlando International Airport, where our station is located, that top speed will be 125 miles an hour. The difference between Cocoa and Orlando, that is a sealed corridor that is fenced, and there are no public grade crossings in that corridor. So let me back up one slide here to the RAISE grant. Rory spoke to this. So the FDOT was awarded this $25 million federal RAISE grant. This is to enhance safety between Miami-Dade and Brevard counties. We're a partner in that, and we contributed an additional $10 million to that grant, as did FDOT, for a total of a $45 million grant. So the focus on this is to put safety mitigations in place that will reduce the two primary causes of accident, or types of accidents, and that is vehicle collisions and trespasser strikes. So what will that include? So that will include rail dynamic envelopes, delineators, raised pavement markers, edge striping, fencing or landscaping, and additional signage, do not stop on tracks, and crisis support signage. And so we will be communicating out when those, where and when those additions will be made, and when construction on that will begin. Go past this. So in terms of our safety outreach, I actually have this flyer, very similar to what's up there. I'll leave them out on the table. This is speaking to the 110-mile-an-hour testing that will be taking place in Brevard. And we have different social media posts that are already ready to go. And so when I send out that communication about Brevard County, there will be a link in there that your social media communications teams can easily just go ahead and download and put out their social media content, or share what we are putting out there as well. We also have a text alert system. If you text RR110 to this number on the screen, you're signed up for a text alert system. I control that text alert system, so what it will do is we'll communicate out when that testing is going to be taking place. We'll direct you to additional information on our website, and then if changes come about, we'll text that out as well. So it's in real time as things are changing. Our outreach is threefold. So you've heard a lot about the engineering. We do work, of course, very closely with law enforcement to enforce the railroad rules and the laws of the road around railroad crossings. And then there's education. And so I want to speak to this for a minute. We recently had an entire fourth grade from the from Pinecrest Academy in Viera that came and toured our station in Orlando. They were actually our first tour. It came about, and there's a video that explains this, but it came about because they were featured in Florida Today because they did a whole segment of their class instruction of the curriculum on the railroad, the history of the railroad, and talking about rail safety. And so we coordinated with the school, and all 80-plus students of this fourth grade came and toured the station. But it's not just about seeing the trains. Obviously, that's the highlight of their trip. But they all took the Rail Safety Pledge. We actually had a representative from the Orlando Police Department who came in and spoke to them, as well as our safety and security team, talked about rail safety. So this is an example of the outreach that we do, in addition to meeting with bus drivers, first responders, our elected officials, community groups. We do tours all week long. We do presentations all week long. And the beginning and end of each of those presentations, not to mention the conversation in the middle, just as today, is about rail safety and hammering that home. You also can see out in the community, you'll see we have VMS boards up as we're doing the work, reminding about safety. We work very closely with local news media. We have our social media posts, the text alerts as well. And so this was an example. When these kids came, they not only learned about the rail industry and how we built Brightline, and so we had a lot of potential future engineers who got a chance to see what their careers could look like, but we got to talk to them about safety. So I want to leave you with this. This field trip came about as a result of a project that Pinecrest Academy had done on the Transcontinental Railroad. At Brightline, we are all about innovation and challenging the status quo. And so when we heard about this class, just a perfect fit to have them come and see what Brightline is all about.
I mean, you couldn't ask for more. As a teacher, I've never had this type of experience with a project heading out into the world like this. So it's such an incredible experience for the teachers and the students involved as well.
I liked going into like the behind the scenes for like the computers and the TVs and stuff. It was really interesting, and we got to see like how they made the TVs and stuff work like that.
It means so much more to be able to have this hands-on experience rather than just talking about it in the classroom, and kids are really going to remember this.
It's rewarding for all of us here at Brightline to see these kids learn about how we operate and also learn about how we have built our tracks all the way to Orlando. And so to be able to see them working directly with our engineers and have that hands-on learning, it's just truly a great opportunity for all of us. We really are excited we were able to do it.
All right, and if you didn't take the rail safety pledge at the beginning, it's there again for you. All right, thank you.
Adam Kohler, District 1. I'd like a business card from you before you leave.
Okay.
And 2, did you say that there were 50 crossings in Brevard County?
That's correct.
Out of how many for the entire length?
Between Cocoa and West Palm, that's out of 156.
We have a third of them.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know what the speed of the train will be during its navigation of the curve in Cocoa?
Somewhere between 60 and 80 miles an hour.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Katie, I did want to say that, through this whole construction period that I think Brightline's and you have done a really good job communicating in the emails about what's happening at the crossings, the press releases. Our community has been very well informed, so thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is reports, and the first report is from the FDOT.
We have
sorry,
real
Laura.
quick about quiet zones.
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
we have one more presentation.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Nope. TPO quiet zone. So now we've heard from FRA and Brightline, and so Laura is going to talk about the TPO's approach to quiet zones. And so this should be kind of give everyone a little update.
Thank you. Well, I guess it's still morning. Good morning. I'm Laura Carter, Space Coast TPO Assistant Director. I want to give a little brief information on the role that the Space Coast TPO has had in the past about quiet zones and what our plan is for the next coming months in the next year. So some of you may know, but many may not, that back in 2014, when Brightline first started as All Aboard Florida, and their plan to put a passenger rail station from Miami to Orlando through Brevard County, we decided that, well, the community might be a little bit upset about the number of horns, train horns that would be occurring and the noise level. And this would occur with quiet zones, eliminating that horn, just the train horn, along not just the passenger, but also it would include freights. All trains would be required on the FRA rail line to be quiet. So we had our consultant evaluate the crossings that would be occurring from the Indian River County line all the way up to Cocoa. And at that time, it was 48. I know that was mentioned there are 50 crossings, but there are 48 crossings evaluated. The majority of them are in the city of Melbourne. They have 18 crossings, and then Brevard County is second with 12 crossings. So what we had them do is look at the actual quiet zone process and what would be involved. In looking at that, it was determined that due to the speed of the train and the safety requirements, supplemental safety measures would need to be installed at all the crossings. And there's a lot of conversation this morning, talked about quad gates, medians, stuff like that, because when you take away the train horn, you have to supplement it with some other safety feature because it is a safety concern. If you eliminate a train horn, many people may not notice that a train is coming, so you have to implement all of those measures. Knowing that Brightline was going to be constructing and going through Brevard County at a high rate of speed, at the time with the research that was done, it was determined to be best in our favor to wait and see what was actually implemented with the Brightline train process and see what we had at the end of their construction, which is where we are right now. With them beginning construction and operation, or ending construction and beginning operations in September, it's time for us to reevaluate what the desire is for quiet zones here in Brevard County. As you know, and what was mentioned, it is a technical process. We will need to be updating inventory sheets to establish what has been implemented as far as the safety measures. We will also want to be reaching out and determining, are quiet zones still wanted? There is the safety measure that we've seen occurring down south with people still getting on the tracks or not removing themselves in time. And, are quiet zones still wanted here? And where are they wanted? It may not be from the county line all the way through to Orlando out through Orange County, but there may be just sections of it that we are desiring to have a quiet zone. So the role of the TPO would be as a facilitator. We as an entity cannot apply for quiet zones. That has to be done by the public agencies, either Brevard County or the municipalities. We would coordinate through our transportation subcommittee and the locals and have a training session. And obviously we invite Rory with FRA. They would do the training. We'd get into the details of what is needed on those calculators, what data is needed. I can tell you that we've already gone out this past year. I'll be doing it again this year, taking AADT volumes of vehicles that are at all the crossings. That's one of the data elements. There are safety information, how many crashes have been occurring. It's straightforward, but again, as he's mentioned, you do probably want to have a little bit of training to offer opportunity for questions. We would help facilitate that. We would help with the gathering of the data and then assist in applying. We can't directly apply, but those who are wishing to apply, we would help with that. There would also be coordination, I think, significantly on the safety messaging and campaigning. You can't just go out there one day and say, okay, we've made a notice of intent, it's been approved, we're implementing a quiet zone. We'll need to reach out to the public. We will need to have probably public outreach with social media. We will need to have signage put up. There'll be a lot of things that need to be put into place before a quiet zone can actually be started. So that would be happening over the next, we plan on having a meeting, I guess, over the next month or so, and moving forward with that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that would be the intended process and role of the TPO, really being the facilitator of implementing quiet zones if that's still desired.
Questions for Laura?
I have a question, and maybe it's more for the FRA representative. I'm sorry. I have a question, maybe it's more for the FRA representative. But when it comes to quiet zones and accidents down in Broward, there were a lot more. Mm-hmm. Were those primarily vehicular crashes or accidents caused by people who are trespassing on the rail lines?
I'll defer to him. I'm sure it's a combination.
Yeah, so because without a horn, you're also going to have those folks walking along the tracks be in jeopardy as well.
Yes, the instance, well, any quiet zone, there is a lack of horns is certainly a factor. The Broward County being specifically, they've had a lot of grade crossing collisions. They also had a lot of trespasser incidents as well. And given the number of crossings Broward County has, they have 30 more crossings than Brevard, and I think they're actually a shorter. It's only 68 miles of track, I want to say. And so there definitely is less of an awareness of some of these instances. We've seen the videos from the locomotive head-ends where the trespassers are completely unaware of trains approaching, or they don't seem to be aware. So it is a factor, the horns being removed. It decreases the overall neighborhood awareness of the trains. Especially when you add 30 plus trains a day on top of what's already there, people aren't familiar. So they just double the trains overnight, literally, in some places.
What, I was going to add, what particular safety measures are in place for the trespasser? Are there any particular things that the railroad can do to keep people off the tracks?
The railroads, they do have the ability to have their own police departments. Florida East Coast Railway does have its own law enforcement, and they do police their railroad right away to remove and deter trespassing. The public safety fencing is a very common and more permanent, it's a continuous effort. You can't have a cop every 10 feet, but they do put up a lot of fencing. Railroads do put up their own. A lot of the communities have put up their own fencing and maintain the fencing themselves, is it Oak Ridge or I can't remember I forget some of the names of some of the towns that put them up. There's a lot of fencing up along the right of ways. Now there's more going into, because the tracks are very accessible on the south end of the things there. I think the big difference from up here is that the tracks are a little off the side. There's a lot of brush between the tracks and the roadways, and some of the areas is not developed. It's very, very densely populated south of Fort Lauderdale all the way to the Miami Central Station. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Roy. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to reports. First report is from the FDOT.
Good morning. Yesenia Encarnacion, FDLT Liaison. On page 89 of your packets, you have a FDLT construction report. I do not have any additional information to report on that, but if you have any questions for me, I can take those at this time.
T. Okay.
Thank you.
So
Good.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
wanted to mention Yesenia. This is her last TACCAC meeting. She is moving on to another job opportunity, and we have truly enjoyed working with her. She really hit the ground running, even though it was very short.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Thank you very much for all
Thank
of
you.
your
Thank you
help.
all for everything, too.
Yeah.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be the BPAC report. Sarah.
All right. So the BPAC met on June 26th to review the fiscal year 24 list of project priorities, as well as also the BPAC strategic assessment recommendations. After a really long, in-depth, productive conversation, they did request that we table them making a recommendation on the BPAC strategic assessment recommendations until August 28th. So with that, this is where it puts the schedule of when you should anticipate the recommendations coming to this group. I did include the slides that was presented to them, but basically they will not be making a recommendation until August 28th. We will then in September bring their recommendation along with staff recommendation and the full presentation that's in your PowerPoint to the TAC, CAC, and Governing Board in September. Governing Board will have the final say, obviously, and then we'll move into implementing whatever the recommendations come out of the strategic assessment. So, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Okay, we'll move on to the next report. Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Ken Harley with Space Coast Area Transit. The local coordinating board met on May 15th and on June 19th. We had the approval of the Transportation Disadvantaged Service Plan. That plan is updated on an annual basis. And some of the significant changes that took place, we established the specific criteria that clients have to meet in order to utilize the Transportation Disadvantaged Service Program. We updated the rate model information. That's the rate that Space Coast Area Transit is allowed to bill the TD Commission for trips to be reimbursed. We established a standard for no-shows as well as a standard for complaints. In addition, there was a policy update for PLC 8, and that is the governance for the local coordinating board. And out of that, a committee of 3 persons was established to review applications for individuals wanting to serve on the local coordinating board. And those recommendations would be presented to the governing board. And the other item was the community transportation coordinators annual evaluation. Out of that evaluation, it was recommended that the community transportation coordinator ensure that applications are on file for all the clients, as well as look at means to reduce the call times for passengers calling to schedule their trips. And the final item was a presentation by David Darm, who's the Executive Director for the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage. And in that report, he basically went over the duties for the local coordinating board, as well as for the community transportation coordinator, as well as for the DOPR, which is a designated official planning organization, which is basically Space Coast TPO. And that is a summary of what happened.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions for Ken this morning? Okay, thank you very much. Next is the public engagement report.
So Abby is on maternity leave, and this is baby Arlo, and Mama and baby are doing exceptionally well. June 28th at 9:22 p.m. So he is absolutely beautiful. So we're very excited for her. The public engagement report is in your package. I will mention just a couple wins. The TPO did receive the Local Public Relations Award for the 2022 annual report. Abby worked very closely with our consultant to develop that report, and we're really very much proud of that. And also, we do have the Stop on Red event. We have a pop-up event coming up soon, and we will, that is going to be on August the 7th. And the location is to be determined, I believe. That's right, Shelby. So that's always a big event for us to kind of go to an intersection where there is really more of a high crash location and just sharing awareness about Stop on Red, which continues to be a problem with people not stopping at red lights. So the full report is in the package for your information.
Okay, anything for Georgiana? All right, our last report is a local government report, if anybody has any items on that.
If I'll mention something.
Please, Devin.
Brevard County started the sidewalk and drainage project on Aurora Road at the beginning of the month, and our Road and Bridge Department's building it, and it goes from John Rhodes Boulevard around the corner to Turtle Mountain.
That's much needed. Thank you, Devin. Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.